cyber. It is built on anomaly detection, right? So being an anomaly in the situation. So I am the anomaly outlier. So maybe I had an outlier advantage. A lot of times there's this excitement of day zero, and after that, everyone moved to the next shiny object, right? Perspective, actually, another thing, and this is a great strategy, right? If you want to get traction as you look at these companies and you identify vulnerabilities, if you want them being addressed and remediated, the best time to do it is before you integrate.
Welcome to the season 5 of The Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host and AppSec enthusiast and growth and community manager at Escape. Today, I'm joined by Kavia Venkatesh, Director of Product Security at a large healthcare organization. She didn't take the traditional path into cybersecurity. She came from biotech. But that outsider lens turned out to be her edge. She's built security programs from the ground up, navigating 9 acquisitions in 18 months, and along the way developed a rare ability to translate risk into language that executives actually act on. In this episode, we talked about what most security teams get completely wrong during integrations, what should we change about how security teams show up in organizations, and the breachability mindset that changes how you approach risks, and much more. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes. Get ready. Kavia doesn't hold back her opinions. Let's dive right in.
Hi, Kavia. I'm super excited to have you on the Elephant and AppSec podcast with me in this new season full of spicy AppSec takes, as usual. And I think your experience is also kind of not very straightforward going into cyber. I think you told me when we just met, it was kind of crash course into cyber. It was absolutely not the original plan. And I think that's something a lot of people actually mention. They got into cyber by accident. You had a passion for biotech, which is not, specifically software development. And then it kind of ended up now as a director of product security and, very outside of traditional career path, and you go to software development, then go into potentially security. What do you think that people that follow this traditional path kind of miss out on?
Well, when you think about cyber, right, it is built on anomaly detection, right? So being an anomaly in the situation. So I am the anomaly outlier. So maybe I had an outlier advantage. I don't know. But on a more serious note, I think from a cyber perspective, the piece that I truly believe has been a strong proponent of me, one, loving what I do and being able to be successful in some of these areas is the ability to align some of the security elements to the business need. Right. I think most times in cyber, we're very focused on the vulnerability, but not on the impact to the business. And that perspective, I believe I got because of the varied experiences I had, so I can bring them all together. Also, I did have an engineering degree, so it was easy for me to jump straight into the deep end from a technical standpoint. So even though it was not traditional, I still had some of that leverage as I got into the cyberspace. So it's a balance of both, of bringing in the business context and really tying in that contextual driven risk communication to our audience and to the enterprise. So that I think has been a win for me, and that's what I want to believe. I also think more than everything, right? You come with a couple of skills. Cybersecurity as a community is a very open and welcoming community, right? You mentioned a lot come in from different perspectives and they thrive in it, right? So you don't, we always talk about this in our team, you don't have to find a security person. You can find a person who enjoys security and teach them security. So that, I think that just being in this community has been also very encouraging to grow and evolve and see the impact of all the great things we did. So many things come together, but the biggest one is the business perspective and being able to think from a different lens, I think.
What do you mean by different lens? People with different backgrounds within the company, or more comparing some C-level things versus someone who is maybe junior?
So I feel like when within cyber, we always think about the security aspects, right? A developer always thinks about getting more code and getting their product to release their product. So everyone has their own agenda that they're driving. And it's very easy for us to really be fixated into our path. When you come from a different world, you understand different paths. So you are able to put yourself and role play a situation better and really build that context to communicate that business risk. Right? And that's the most important thing is people don't want to do the wrong thing, but they don't understand when you say you have CVE 7087 or something, people are like, hey, yeah, I don't understand what that means. And I think that's the piece that I've gotten from being, I won't say I'm an outsider anymore, but having that perspective has definitely helped.
Yeah, I think I totally agree, and especially like some that could be very useful to understand for someone who is junior and getting started, because even like in the people who I work with who are junior, they focus so much on the details, even if they have to do presentation, to some like a C level, and they don't understand how to communicate that business actually impact to them and go for like a more storytelling point of view. And you have to learn fast how to do it if you want to progress in the company. I think you worked in a also like several tech companies, and that one of them was in a really like hyper growth. And you told me you had to build kind of a lot of basically M&A security program from scratch, because there were so many different acquisitions happening. And I think it was 9 in like 18 months, something like this, right?
Yeah.
Which is huge. And it's like already I know like some companies where it's completely chaos to go through maybe a couple of them in a year. What did you see actually was the most stressful part of it?
I think when you think about building this program, it's very exciting, right? Because we were building it out from scratch. This was a couple of years ago. I think only recently people started realizing that a lot of the breaches that we're seeing is tied to these acquired entities. But before that became more public, when you look at it, right, M&As come in, obviously it's almost like introducing a completely new infrastructure into your ecosystem. And even within an organization, if you don't think of an M&A, infrastructure changes are hard. They're very difficult to drive and take many, many years. When you have a whole new organization, there are a couple of things that you have to take into consideration, and you don't even have the additional time and the cycles to work through them. So you have to build some sort of a blueprint that helps you like pace through some of those core requirements. So prioritization is key. So when I was building the MA program, a big piece of how I thought about it was the breachability mindset. When you think about acquiring a company, hey, what am I taking on? What's the risk I'm taking on? And as you start looking at prioritization of how do I integrate this organization, you notice that most of these organizations do are all doing the right thing, but their focuses are different. And more than 50% of the security incidents you see are not because of malicious actors, but because of integration gaps. Someone missed something. There was lateral movement, right? And those are the things that do not pay too much attention to. So a big focus was prioritizing the integration gaps and making sure we're not uh, like impacted through identity logging or tool mismatch and things like that, where there's a gap of visibility. You're doing something, the other company is doing something. So you want to make sure you get that. So when I was looking at building the M&A program, a big focus was how do we, one, from a breachability mindset, how do I make sure that I'm not taking on that risk? Second, as I integrate them, how do I make sure I don't have any integration gaps that could be a potential security incident, right? Third, lateral movement. How do we make sure there's no lateral movement that is exposing us from a company perspective? So those are a couple of things that I would focus on. I know a lot of folks are very excited about acquisitions. They want to announce it. There's a lot
Really?
of surrounding, right? And they want everything to be done quickly. But it is important to pause and understand the strategy behind integration before jumping into integration, because a lot of times what happens is there's this excitement of day zero, and after that, everyone forgets about it and then move to the next shiny object, right? So
Yes.
from a security
I mean, that's
perspective,
how agility looks like.
yeah, great. And from a security perspective, actually, another thing, and this is a great strategy, right? If you want to get traction as you look at these companies and you identify vulnerabilities, if you want to get traction on them being addressed and remediated, the best time to do it is before you integrate. Through that transition phase, using that to like drive remediation has been a big one too, because after people are moving on to the next shiny object. So it's also prioritizing some of your risk remediation wins, in addition to just thinking through like lateral movement and integration.
Hmm. And if you go back to the integration part, did you create a I don't know, checklist of all the integrations, a file? How did you actually create that visibility into all the gaps?
So at that point, it was very checklist focused.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, while we were doing due diligence, we used to use a similar concept as SOC 2 Type 2.
Mm-hmm.
But then we kind of realized that it was more a checkbox exercise, and we really needed to think of it as a more pragmatic
Mm-hmm.
solution, especially because the gap we saw is we were collecting great information through due diligence, but when we went into integration, none of that information correlated to help me really work through my integration timelines or my integration strategy. So we reworked that piece to make sure, as a part of due diligence, even though you get limited information, you are actually building in a prerequisite of what you'd need for integration. So you in the background are already thinking about all of those elements, and you have all your ducks in a row. So that was one big element. The other piece from an integration strategy standpoint was breaking it out. We used the NIST framework at that point. So
Mm-hmm.
breaking it out by domain, identifying functional owners and having them drive it. And then depending on the company, there were different areas we had to focus on. Right. So obviously that was a risk-based decision that we would make. I think a biggest win for us was the compromise assessment that we used to do with, I think at that point was CrowdStrike. I also want to say BugCrowd has something similar to that, but that really helps drive or get a sense of what is the security appetite for this organization. If you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
many capabilities, you know that this is not front and center for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is what
Yeah.
we use to like, hey, this is probably the breachability index, tactically show risk reduction immediately before day one, and then use NIST strategy to build out those domains, but prioritize based on the business impact. So those were a couple of things, all of that came together, and essentially we would have a checklist at that time. Maybe now it would be slightly different, but that was essentially what we built up. And that became the blue. So every acquisition, we would obviously use the same blueprint, but we'd adjust it based on the business and some of the risks that came in from the business as we understood it from due.
How did you judge, for example, security maturity? Because quite often when you acquire a new company, there are also security maturity practices, are quite different. Their development teams are quite different, depending sometimes on the country, depending the appetite for security. How did you make sure that, as you mentioned before, remediation aspect, that maybe the companies with less security maturity actually were gradually on board and developers actually remediated the findings?
It's definitely a cultural exercise, right? I have seen situations where the teams would go up in arms and say, hey, why do you think this is more secure over this, right? So we had to really work through it and highlight some of those expectations. When you're working through an integration, and just because it's so reactive and it has so much press coverage, so much emotion tied to it,
Yeah.
you get some reactive gains very quickly. So you're able to show risk reduction, you're able to show, oh, I got this integrated. But the cultural aspect of having teams transition to a new way or a slightly different way, that's the hardest part. And I will be honest with you, in hindsight, I don't think when I was doing M&A, I focused on it as much as I should have when I look back at it. Like, I think if it's lessons learned, we didn't really focus on the cultural aspect. If I had to redo this all over
Interesting.
again, I would definitely focus on, yes, there's that integration strategy, the risk reduction, but how do we make sure culturally we're building in some of those, we're at least making those investments to bring the teams together. They are organically more aligned to what we think is security and how we want to drive security in the organization. I think that was something that I didn't do too much of. If I did it again, that would be a big focus area for me.
What culture, what action, like specific actions would you implement to culturally try to change that?
But security culture is the hardest one. And it has to be done in the most organic way, right? I know we have security training and all of that fun stuff, but we all know everyone does it as an HR exercise. It's not really focused on cultural improvement. It's always a culture versus compliance kind of an investment.
Yeah.
And as leaders, it's a very underestimated area because you can't really show immediate metrics in that space. So a couple of things is building culture more from a, hey, how do we want people to perceive us in this organization? And I think when I chatted with you for the first time, we talked about this, right? Security people, extremely technical. They want to do the right thing, extremely ethical. But one of the pieces that we really struggle with is marketing ourselves on what we bring to the organization, right? And from a culture perspective, if that's something we drive as, hey, how do you want to show up here? Right. And these are the things you could do. I think that would go a long way. A couple of ways to do that is hosting events. Like people love being part of events. Security folks love conferences.
Yes.
And yes, right. So really understanding your audience of what they really like and bringing that to them to drive that culture, I think goes a long way. It comes with investment, doesn't show immediate return for leadership, but from a long-term organic shift, I think that is much required for organization.
Yeah, I think it's definitely sometimes hard to justify investments where you can't prove direct ROI. I think it depends a lot on the leaders in the company and what value they place on long-term initiatives versus short-term. Just very, very hard. And I think while driving attendance, I know like firsthand to all of the events, it's also, and I think sometimes you need to find like the right topic for people to be interested, or as we chatted before, the right price and the focus on more like carrot versus stick. And I think you mentioned on your side, no one signed up for the CTF before you actually offered a MacBook for them, which I've tried that example recently in my team to motivate them to be more active on social media. And it worked. Everyone was very motivated. Who's going to get the prize? It was a restaurant for them plus one, which is, and everyone was motivated. So it does work for sure. But you need to find people also behind that in the leadership who would be motivated to justify that expense. Do you think also like,
the leaders want to see, sorry to cut you off, but our leaders want to see ROI. Our teams also want to see ROI, right? So they're like, hey, if I'm going to do this, what am I getting in return? So I think being in the position you and me are, we're constantly balancing that out. And how do we make sure our leaders are getting their ROI, but also how are our team members getting ROI? It's not about doing the best thing for the company. They also need to feel motivated and energized, and having incentives, having swag, having prizes definitely goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure, much more potentially than the tools that use. But I think even though there are sometimes tools that help, and also to monitor all of this cultural, I would say, activities. I think now, like in the security champions side, there are different platforms that exist as well to kind of create that behavioral change for sure. And like speaking about tools, I think something you mentioned as well before, like you actually go online to search for them on the different platforms. And where do you usually go when you need to like very accurate opinions about the tools, product security tools that are available in the market?
So we do a couple of things, right? And I think the world has changed a lot. Today, you just have folks reaching out to you on LinkedIn. There's a
Well,
self-founded
that's a part of
problem,
the
right?
strategy.
But when you look at it, especially when you are in larger organizations, you cannot select a tool that cannot scale or is not redundant, just given the commitments we have, some of the compliance obligations we have, right? We do need to have a method to the madness, especially as we select tools and roll it out in our environment. It is a lot, very, very big responsibility, especially for security leaders, right? And there are many options out there. It's not easy, right?
Yeah.
A couple of things that I do is definitely look at Gartner, the Magic Quadrant, look at a couple of analyst frameworks. We've had a couple of very good open source frameworks that have also been released by security leaders. I'll share some here, but try to bring all of that together to at least give us a baseline of how we think some of these tools can solve for the problems we are looking to solve for, right? And those help us determine at least the baseline of which ones we want to take into the running. So it funnels down the list from a few hundreds to maybe the fives or the tens. And then as we look through them, a big portion for me is peer feedback. So I definitely look through the peer feedback, reach out to folks, get a sense of their experience, some of the problems they solve. Because there are many a times we are looking at only solving one problem, and we identify some more opportunities by these peer review folks. And also the peer feedback helps us identify, hey, these are the additional use cases I could solve for that could make a great ROI statement for my leadership. But also I know it works because it worked in their environment. So I have more confidence in testing it out. The next piece is really looking at the architecture fit of how the tool is built, how has the tool performed in the market. And honestly, between you and me, the most success I have seen is use case validation through pilots and POCs. I would never jump into buying a tool without doing those. And I don't mind spending a couple of cycles doing that to get the right tool for my environment. But that is essentially what seals the deal. Is you can get the best tool, have all the capabilities, but there are nuances of your environment that the tool needs to solve for, and different tools handle it differently. So that aspect has been a very important element. And for me, it actually has been an eye-opener, because there are times where I look at Gartner and these frameworks and they'll give you a confidence on a specific tool. But when you go in to do the pilot, you'll probably see results from a tool that didn't really shine in one of these reports. So it's an interesting combination of bringing all these together. If you do not pilot test it in an environment and understand your goal, what are you really trying to solve for? I think that's the biggest piece. You need to know your problem statement and your expectation so they are able to deliver to your needs. I think those are the key elements that I focus on when I look at tools.
Yeah, I think the environment part is something that we've seen a lot of, I've seen a lot of not struggle, but like a lot of importance is put on that. And I mean, that's why, for example, on our side, we put focus 100% only like very highly distributed environments, and like we don't work with startups because we don't want those. But we just know that our tool is the best for specific type of environment, and this is something that really like resonated with all security leaders that I talked with, security engineers, no matter where they are in the company and level of experience. So I absolutely agree with you. I really would love to get the names of those open source frameworks where you looked at, so we can put that in a link in the description of the episode and share with others. I think that could be very helpful. I think on our side, IDC, for example, is very in-depth. Also, Alacia was very in-depth technical analysis, but Gartner is a bit less. So that's interesting to see also like how it's approached, from another angle, I would say. And right now, also a lot of security tools are actually getting acquired, by AI companies or tech companies. It was literally this week we had Viz and and Google Cloud that announced that finally it's finalized. I've seen, I think, also just after we chatted first time, about the AI, Anthropic released like Cloud Code Security, and there was, oh my God, such a panic in the industry. I feel like it's something we'll see more and more potential, like all AI companies getting into security? Do you share the same kind of sentiment?
Yeah, I'm actually in a dilemma where I'm actually fighting this in my mind. And it's almost like
Really?
seeing a lot of these AI companies, does that mean SDLC is going to go away, especially with things like Claude Code, right? But it becomes more and more apparent that the dynamics is going to change, but traditional scanning is almost like foundational. So it'll still be around. It might not be the center of gravity anymore. And it almost emphasizes that we're moving away from the security by design mindset to security by default mindset. So when I think about it, I know a lot of folks are like, is it doomsday? Are we not going to have security engineers anymore? Are we not going to be doing any scanning anymore? What does this mean? I truly believe that this is a new opportunity where we can elevate ourselves from just being like vulnerability chasers to really architecting solutions to be able to embed security ground up, right? And that positions us very differently in product management conversations. So I'm excited about that with AI. Honestly, I feel like it's going to create a new emphasis on security, and we're not going to be more the, like you said earlier, the stick who says, hey, you need to do this for compliance. But it becomes a part of our existence. Like you have to do it, right? So I think that's the piece I'm more excited about. I'm definitely looking forward to elevating the security role of being the security police to really being positioned as a technology partner to build and embed security ground up. So that's something I'm definitely looking forward to.
Yeah, I think it's because like a lot of those AI companies are focusing on the safety is actually important part, and their whole like safety team, which is different from like security in a sense, but it does cover, this part which is very, important. But you mentioned like you feel like it might be possible that the CDLC is kind of disappears. Why do you think that?
I'm hoping it won't disappear. If it does, and if it makes folks' life easy, still keeping us secure, that's definitely a good sign. Things are moving very quickly, right? Almost a couple of months ago, we were talking about AI agents assisting you with writing code. Today, they're writing code, right? So things are moving at lightning speed. And I do believe some of our traditional tools cannot keep up with that volume, especially as things move that quickly. So we'll have to think about how we do this better. So it's also challenging us to be more effective in how we deliver to our community. The other piece that I think will come up from this is we're very much focused on existing vulnerabilities or flaws. And now we'll start thinking about more resilience, intent, system safety, right? So we are going to have a new area that would evolve in cyber and product security where we're not just vulnerability focused, but really thinking about, hey, how do we make sure we're not introducing new risks within an organization by enabling like all of these components of intent, resilience early on? Is there something else that could happen, or could it morph into something
Mm.
else? I think it would be an interesting adventure for us to all figure out. I don't think anybody has the answer to it. We'll have to see how things span over the next couple of months or years. But I think there's definitely going to be a shift. I don't know how quick though. It'll be
And as you said, everything is evolving at the lightning speed, so maybe actually very quick earlier than we know.
historically, we've been focusing a lot of our energy, especially in the product security space, on context, prioritizing findings for developers. Developer experience has been like a big piece that you've probably heard about.
Mm. Yeah.
And now all of those elements shift because now you have an AI agent writing that code.
Hmm.
So need to think about from a product security perspective, what are the elements we want to focus on now that developer experience might not be a core component of what we deliver on.
Yeah, I think the context is going to be a core experience because in AI, the most important thing is the context that you give and the context that has access to, and if the AI agent is writing. the code, it should have the right context within the organization that's given securely to it, so it's able to write also secure code autonomously. And there's one question, so I ask always in this season on the podcast, since we talk about the future and the full speed that it brings. What do you think will be the buzzword that will drive kind of the most attention?
Interesting. AI isn't the buzzword. I think that's become a part of our life now. I
Yeah.
think me, it'll be shift zero. We focused so much of our energy over the last couple of years on shift left. And now with the new way of how code is being generated, I think shift zero is going to be a big part of our focus and everything that will come with that. So yeah, I think shift zero for the win on that one.
That's the first time I hear about like shift zero. That's interesting concepts. I heard shift everywhere, which is right. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, who knows? I think we'll take a look at it by the end of the year and we'll see how it changes for sure. Thank you so much, Kavia, for coming on the show. It was a pleasure chatting with you. We've covered a lot of different topics at once. I'm still looking for all the links to put in the description of the episode, and it was great learning for you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. I think both of us are definitely looking forward to the future of how cyber turns out. The more optimist me is looking forward to the embed security to be more intuitive and second nature. Definitely more opportunities, more exciting things, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. I think the only one thing that's not going to change is security conferences. Like, that's going to be the constant.
More CTFs for sure.
More CTFs. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a good one.